people that, you know, are in this movement and for young people. And then the next question is, after we've just, you know, kind of talked about why we fight for 1.5, the question is, how do we do that? How do we grow this movement? And so we have two amazing people from Canvas, and I'm going to talk to you a little bit more about what that is and, you know, what that means a little bit in between, who are going to be giving us a great input about, you know, what are the steps we can take to organize, and what the steps you guys can take to organize. So I think without further ado, I probably should stop talking. I'll just hand over to Mitzi. And as I said, again, if you have any questions during the webinar, feel free to ask them in the chat or in the Q&A function. And if you have any problems, you can also just write that in there as well, and we'll try and help that. And if you want to hear any translations, you can do that in the Zoom with the translation button on the bottom right. Yeah, so go ahead, Mitzi. I'm really excited what you're going to tell us.
Hi, everyone. So thank you, Helena, for that introduction. I am Mitzi Nelton. I am the co-founder and convener of Youth Advocates for Climate Action Philippines, which is basically the Fridays for Future of the Philippines. And basically, Helena's already said it, 1.5 is very important, but why is it so important? If we look at what's happening in the Philippines today, we're already at 1.2 degrees Celsius warmer world from pre-industrial times. So that means our world is warming, and starting from pre-industrial times, 1.2 degrees Celsius has already risen. And we're looking at 1.2 now, and it's already catastrophic. So we hear that a lot, but what does it actually mean? The Philippines gets an average of around 20 typhoons per year. So that already sounds horrible. This year we already experienced 21, so we are already above average, and we're expecting more before the year ends. In those 21 typhoons, 4 of them happened in less than 3 weeks. One of them was the strongest typhoon on the planet this year, and barely a week after that, a typhoon brought a month's worth of rain in under 24 hours. And so it's these more extreme, more frequent typhoons hitting us one after the other that's making it so difficult for us to adapt, making it so difficult for our systems to cope. And even before that, even to begin with, not looking at the weather, not looking at the extreme calamities, the Philippines is already in a struggling position to develop because we don't have climate adaptation policies in place. We don't have systems in place that are capable of handling these extreme typhoons and extreme events, because our scientists aren't being prioritized, and they're not being our scientists aren't being supported here. And so we don't have the equipment to properly actually forecast when there's a typhoon coming, how strong it will be. We don't have systems in place to announce to our to the citizens of the Philippines if there's a typhoon coming and how bad it will be. A lot of it is also coming from miscommunication and lack of education, because one of the typhoons in 2013, one of the biggest typhoons in the Philippines, which killed over 6,000 people, it was called Typhoon Haiyan. One of the reasons why so many people died was because when it was announced in the news that there was a typhoon surge coming, people didn't know what that meant because of lack of education, because of lack of climate education. And even the few privileged few that do have climate education, the way it's taught is very foreign and Western and technical and very alienating. So it doesn't actually empower you. It doesn't help you connect the dots that what we're already experiencing is because of the climate crisis. It just always seems like there's global warming on this side, and then we're experiencing these really bad typhoons on this side, but the connections there aren't made in school. You learn about it later on through social media and through the climate movement. That's how you find out about it, and that's how you get empowered. And that has to be changed, because that's actually a big reason why a lot of climate activists in the Philippines are a lot older, because you don't get empowered early on in school. You don't get empowered early on in your communities to act, because there's also that part that in the Philippines, it's very there's this stigma of activism that if you are an activist, especially if you're a young activist, then you are being disrespectful to your elders, because it's such a big thing here, like respecting your elders, which is important, but that doesn't mean we're not going to call out inaction. That doesn't mean we're not going to call out our government. And it's just 1.2 is it's such a difficult thing to paint and to understand, because technically, scientifically, we can't pin this specific typhoon to climate change. There is no like scientific basis for that. But we do know that typhoons are getting more frequent and they are getting more intense. We can't pin this exact typhoon on climate change, but we do know that the intensity of the typhoons have been changing, and we're seeing some parts of the Philippines did not get hit by typhoons before, and now they are getting hit by typhoons. And because they never knew that because they aren't used to getting hit by typhoons, then it's even harder for them to adapt. I guess a way to really picture this is, when I was preparing for the strongest typhoon on the planet this year, I was talking to a few friends from Australia, from the UK, and they were telling me to, Mitzi, fill up your bathtubs. And I'm like, we don't have bathtubs in the Philippines. That's a rich person thing. And they're like, okay, fill up your sinks. I'm like, why do you want me to fill up my sinks? And they're like, so you have clean drinking water. And I'm like, we can't drink from the tap. And that just, I didn't realize how mind-blowing that is, but for them it's so mind-blowing that we can't drink from the tap. So if we run out of clean water, we're out. We can't drink from the tap. We're stuck inside. And they were telling me to already evacuate because the rivers beside me were rising. And I said, I can't evacuate yet because we're not allowed to yet, because we don't have evacuation centers. We have schools that get turned into evacuation centers, or we have churches or basketball courts that get turned into evacuation centers. But also, if we go there now without any warning, we will be pushed away. We will be told not to come here because there's only so much space in the evacuation centers, especially with COVID. And that's just how it looks. That's what 1.2 is like here in the Philippines. And it's not just that. What makes it so difficult to be a climate activist in the Philippines, it's not just the climate crisis, it's not just our government's inaction with COVID-19, it's also the way that our government is actively silencing and trying to repress us. Yesterday was International Human Rights Day, and 7 activists were arrested in the middle of the night, and fake guns and fake explosives were planted in their homes. There's footage of this online, and you can see the police planting the guns in the boxes and then covering it up and then looking and finding it. And it's just, that's another barrier, not just in the Philippines, but this is happening in a lot of other countries where activists are being silenced and repressed, being called terrorists. And that's a part of your fight. That's a part of our fight for 1.5. The fight for 1.5 is also the fight for freedom. The fight for 1.5 is also the fight for democracy. The fight for 1.5 is to fight climate injustice.
Oh, thank you so much. I don't even know what to say after that. I think I probably should just not say anything. I think I'm not going to add anything. Sorry. So I feel like that has made very clear why we need to fight for 1.5. That is so absolutely clear right now. And then we often come into this moment where we don't know what to do anymore. And I feel like that shaped a lot of people before they joined the climate movement, that we stood there, we saw a problem, we knew it was happening. And we as individuals, as one of billions of people on this planet, we seem to think we can't do anything to change that. And I feel like over the last years, we have seen again and again what civil action and what normal everyday people can do to change the world, and can do to change politics and society, and can do for the fight for 1.5. And hopefully that's what we're going to hear about a little bit in the next part, is how we can actually start doing that, and then what steps we can actually take. We're going to have input from Jelena and Milan from Canvas. Canvas is the Center for Applied Nonviolent Actions and Strategies, which is kind of long, so I'll just say Canvas. I'll just tell you a little bit about them so you can maybe appreciate them coming here today to talk to us. So Canvas, as far as I know, started in Serbia when the Serbian dictator Milosevic was overthrown. The people started a revolution, and a successful revolution. And after that, Canvas was kind of born and went on to train other movements and to train, basically people in other countries such as Standing Rock, Extinction Rebellion, and so on, basically on how do we start movements, even when there's little civic space, even when there's not a million NGOs already. How do we do that even when maybe different rights that, that we maybe, appreciate in Germany, for instance, where I am, are not there and are not given. And so I'm really excited about their input. I think you also have a presentation which you're going to share. And if anything I just said was wrong, please correct me and I'll hand over to you guys.
No, thank you. You were right, actually. But you forgot the crucial thing about the history of Canvas is that the Canvas is founded by the people who founded Otpor. Otpor was the movement who was actively involved in overthrowing Serbian dictator Slobodan Milosevic in 2000. So Canvas actually evolved out of Otpor because when we managed to overthrow our dictator in a non-violent way, people from all over the world started calling us and asking, how did you guys do it in a non-violent way? And then many people started traveling and sharing our experiences until in 2004, Srđa and Slobo, two of the founding members of Otpor, decided to found Canvas in order to share this knowledge, publish books, make it into something that is easily transferable. So since 2004, we have worked with many different organizations from more than 55 countries, and this number is rising all the time. Me personally, I worked with activists from over 35 countries from all continents, and we have quite an extensive experience about movements and how movements are functioning. So what are we going to talk about today? It's basically how do you make a social movement or how to mobilize for change, but this is going to be a digest version because usually Canvas trainings are 5 working days, like full-time working days. When we work with our participants, we do a lot of exercises. I mean, not exercises, but exercises where they create many different things. But today we are going to talk about the basics. How do you build a movement? So how do you do that? So recently there are many popular videos on YouTube talking about unboxing different devices or things. So today we are going to do a little bit of unboxing the social movements. So we are going to explain to you how everything actually functions and what you can do in order to make a movement that can actually incite some form of change. So Canvas has a lot of experience. We have been working with many movements, as I said. Some of the movements were the pro-democracy movements fighting against authoritarian regimes, fighting against the dictators. Some organizations that we worked with are actually organizations fighting for women's rights in Middle East. We have worked with environmental organizations. We have worked with students from different universities. So actually what I'm trying to say is that what we are going to talk about, how to create a social movement, is applied everywhere. So basically, if you look at the basics, they are the same. Whether you are an activist, I don't know, in Nicaragua fighting an undemocratic regime, or you are, I don't know, an environmental NGO in Niger Delta who is trying to make big oil responsible for the damage that they make to the environment, the basics are the same. So let's talk about this. So we are going to talk about these 10 steps, and you have to understand something. this movement building is actually a process. So this is a skill that you can learn. It's not something that you get born with. Of course, there are people who are natural leaders, but this is not what we are talking about. We're talking about movement. And one of the most important things about movements, and this is what we learned in our case, the leader is not that important. The idea is most important. In our case, in Serbian case, Otpor did not have a leader. So there was not a single leader. And that created a good situation for us, because if you have a single person who is leading an organization, then that person can be arrested, co-opted, killed, or there are many different ways how your opponent may target this single person who is the leader, and not talk about the main things. And these are the ideas. This is what is behind the scene. So we are going to talk about the 10 simple steps that you need to make sure in order that you need to do in order to have a successful movement. So first of all, we have to think about step one. And step one we call know your battlefield. So what do we say battlefield? It sounds so militaristic, but you have to understand that non-violent struggle is the form of warfare. Only it is being, how can I say, fought using non-violent methods, but it is a form of warfare. And we like to quote a lot Sun Tzu. He is the Chinese military commander from 400 BC. He wrote the book Art of War, and it is something very important. And I really implore you, if you haven't read it, you need to read it. Why? Because if you want to make a movement who wants to make a change, you need to read this, because it talks about strategy, and strategy is crucial when we talk about successful movements. So first of all, I'm going to quote Sun Tzu and say, know yourself, know your enemy, and know the battlefield, know the terrain, and you will know the outcome of 1,000 battles. What does that mean? It means do your homework. Understand what are your strengths and weaknesses. Analyze your opponent for their strengths and weaknesses. But the most important thing is choose the battlefield where you are going to have this conflict of yours. So for instance, if we are trying to beat Michael Jordan, you all know Michael Jordan, especially now after the latest Netflix movie, but Michael Jordan, the famous basketball player of Chicago Bulls, the legendary number 23. So if you want to beat him, how do you plan to do that? Definitely you are not going to invite him on a basketball match one-on-one because he's the best there. You will try to get him into the arena where he doesn't feel so good. So maybe let's go swimming, or let's do hockey. Let's do something that is not normal for your opponent, and in this case, Michael Jordan. So you need to pick the battles, and this is why it is important when we talk about different social movements. Non-violence is the crucial there. We are going to talk a little bit more about it, but then this is why when you are bringing your opponent into non-violent arena, then you control everything. So if your opponent is, it has a lot of resources, then you try to bring them into the field where you have the home advantage. And this is very important. So in our case, our warfare is fighting, is the fight between status quo and change. And we actually want to change. We want change. We don't want to remain in status quo. So before I continue, am I talking too fast for the translators? Maybe if they can say something if I'm talking too fast, or write somewhere, and then please, Helena, inform me if I'm talking too fast.
No,
Sometimes,
they say it's fine.
Yeah, sometimes.
Thank you. Thanks for asking.
So another very important thing of knowing the battlefield is knowing who are the people there. So if we look at this, this is what we call the spectrum of allies, or as some of the activists that we work with like to call a pizza pie. So when we look at this spectrum of allies, we can see that there are different social groups in every society, which is normal. And there are some of those who are positive to the thing that we are trying to do, and the other who are negative to the thing we are trying to do. So one of the most important and first things that you need to do is you need to understand who are your allies and who are your opponents. So when we talk about allies, there are different groups and organizations who want to do the same thing you are trying to do. But obviously there are some problems, something is not working, because if it's working, you would be joining them, you would not be creating a new organization. So first you have to identify who are the players in this battlefield. And then you will easily notice that the majority of the people in the society is actually oblivious neutrals, are the people who have no idea what is going on. And that is something that you need to understand. Because if you are talking about specifically climate change, I'm sure that when you talk about it with your friends and people from your organizations, people who know things about climate change, they are very, how can I say, passionate about it. They really want to do something because they understand what is going on. Then on the other side, you have your opponents. I don't know, big oil, who is saying, no, everything is fine with what climate change? Climate change is good because, you know, we will have more resources available for drilling in the, Arctic. So the thing is, they will always be your opponents. But then you will understand that the majority of people is neutral because they don't know what is going on, or they hear some things, but they don't trust, or they hear very, different information, and it creates this noise that people are trying to avoid. So for you, it is important to identify what is the structure of your society. Why? Because if you want to achieve a change in a non-violent way, you need to have the majority of people on your side. And that's something without you cannot do anything. And if you do an analysis of different non-violent movements throughout the history, you will notice this. And there is also another thing. There are actually only two kinds of movements in the world. There are spontaneous movements and there are successful movements. Yeah, spontaneous or successful. What does that tell you? Nothing is spontaneous. It is very hard to motivate people on a spontaneously. They can do something, but it will not lead to an effective change unless you have a plan, unless you know what you want to do. So step 2. The most important thing, after you identify the battlefield, after you identified what are the targets that you are trying to tackle, is to find the vision and unity. So what is vision? Vision of tomorrow is something that you are, it's actually the declaration of what you are trying to achieve or what you are trying to change. So vision of tomorrow is something that needs to resonate among the people. And this is something that will lead to unity, because the quality vision of tomorrow will persuade people to recognize themselves in it. And there is one thing that, you know, it's a secret about the humans, but you need to know is that people are selfish and they're not going to act on something just because you told them, like, you know, climate change is bad. So what you need to understand is that people are selfish and they will only act if it's in their own interest. So what your vision of tomorrow and what is your main purpose is to make people understand how climate change affects or will affect their daily lives and the lives of their families. So before going to the people and tell them, you know, have you noticed that a CO2 level in the atmosphere has risen significantly and we need to do something about it? You know, like a farmer would say, like, yeah, what? So what? But the point is, if you would explain to that farmer that because of the climate change that is happening, he will not have access to water. We see in some parts of the world that the rainfall has diminished severely, affecting agriculture. And if you talk to that person about the levels of CO2 in the atmosphere or the these things, they will not understand. But if you try to explain to different social groups that you are trying to target, if you find the way to explain to them in a very plastic, how we like to say, very plastic way, very understandable way, how this will affect their lives, then you will find the potential allies there, and then they can understand how this will affect their lives, and then that might motivate them to do something and to change. So, and also when we are talking about your vision and all the messages that you're trying to send out to the people, they have to do several things. So first of all, let me just go back, it will be easier. Yeah. So first, if you look at here, you have some messages that will be focused on the left side of this spectrum. So it will be focusing on your allies. So the messages you are trying to send to your allies is to mobilize them, to encourage them, to push them to action in order to, to create what you're trying to do. Then on the other side, your actions need to be created in a way that you will mute your opponents. You will actually mute them and try to, how can I say, remove them from the equation. And you need to focus more on the oblivious neutrals, where is always the majority of the people in any society. Those are the neutrals, people who are actually mainly because they don't have enough information about specific issue, but they are not taking any active part in it. Another thing which is very important, when we talk about unity, as I said, in order to achieve successful nonviolent change, you need to have the majority of people on your side. And how to do that is by creating these messages that will be around unity. Another thing why unity is important is because unity brings diversity. The more people you have involved, the more diverse your organization or movement is. And that means that there are more people with different skills, different experiences, and they all bring a new energy and new life to movement. So it is very important for you to understand the need for having diversity in your group, because the more, the more diverse your group is, the better the effects will be. Because if it is very diverse, then, and another thing is the way how we think you should organize and discussions and meetings is holding a public ones where everybody can participate, everybody can add something of their own into this. They can suggest an action, but then if the majority of people decide this is something good, then when everybody decides it is going to be done, then there is no more democracy. It is pure implementation of the tasks that are being assigned. So, as I say, it is important to plan your journey to victory. So, to have a successful nonviolent change, there are three basic principles. First one is unity. We talked about unity. Why unity is important? Because you need to have the majority of people on your side in order to achieve a change. The second very important thing, or the principle, how we call it, is planning. Because without planning, you will not be able to achieve anything. So planning is crucial in your work. So what does that mean? That means that you need to have general strategy, you need to have campaigns and individual tactics, and they all need to lead to a specific thing. So the general strategy is actually your vision of tomorrow. What are you trying to achieve? How do you want to change your society to be better in the future by adopting this or that? But this is your general strategy. Strategy is actually what do you need to do in order to achieve the general strategy? So for instance, let's say you want to change a law. This is the general strategy. You need to have more better laws that will be thinking about environment and not just the profit. So strategy is actually how do you plan to achieve this? So in order to achieve this, you need to have, I don't know, a law drafted. So how are you going to achieve this? This is a strategy. Then you need to have this law adopted. These are all the things that will lead towards the general strategy. And then you have campaigns that are related to each of the different strategies. And then you have individual tactics. Those are the daily things that are happening on a daily level where you are tackling different pillars or different sections of society. Step 4, as it says here, targeting is everything. So for you, it is important to understand why you are doing specific things. And here is an excellent example. If you see on the right-hand side, it is an image of Rosa Parks. I don't know how much of you are familiar with Rosa Parks, but she is actually an American civil rights movement icon. She actually refused to give her seat in the bus to the white person because that was the law at that time. If there are not enough seats for white people in the bus, then they can sit on the place where the black person is sitting, and this is normal. One day she refused to do that. And everybody knows about this case. And they think Rosa Parks, she is the one who managed to defeat, she managed to achieve this victory for the civil rights movement. But actually what she did, she had a very crucial role. She pointed out a very important situation that was happening for every African-American person at that time in the US, is that if you are riding in a bus, especially in the South, if you're riding in a bus, there is a space behind you where it's for the black people, and there is a space in front which is for the white people. And if the white seats are all filled, then they can sit in the back. But the point is that she was not actually the person who managed to overthrow this policy, but she pointed out. And then there were people who understood the importance of this, and they created a strategy of how they are going to achieve this. So what they realized that in city of Montgomery in the US, I think, I'm not sure which state, I think Georgia, in the city of Montgomery, the majority of the white people were actually driving their own cars. And the public buses were predominantly used by African Americans. And they realized, okay, so, and of course, the owners of these bus companies were all white people. So the activists there, the civil rights movement's activists, realized, okay, this is something that is important because actually we are giving them our money and they are treating us in this bad way. So they decided to boycott the bus transportation. And this is what you will be facing when we are talking about the climate change. You are going to be targeting the opponents who are not thinking emotionally, who are not thinking about what is good for the environment, for the planet Earth, for their family. They will think only about the bottom line, the profit. You know, the Excel table, whether it is black or red at the end, that's the most important thing for the businessman. It's the profit. And are they making profit or not? So these activists realize that they can cut a huge amount of profit of these companies because they are supporting the apartheid. And by boycotting these buses, they actually managed to put a pressure on these white company owners for them to pressure the white people in the government and to stop the segregation. So why I'm talking targeting is everything. You need to be sure why you are picking specific targets and create a strategy that will be costly for them. So why am I saying this? Because if we are able to raise the price of what we are doing above the level of profit that this company is making, they will stop doing what they are doing. So I know that Fridays for Future have some ideas about targeting, and they are quite good, but it is important for you to be very specific in this, to think it through and understand how this is going to affect your opponent. Okay, so step 5, recruiting people, because everything is, as I say, about the numbers. You need to have the majority of people on your side in order to achieve a successful nonviolent change. And how do you do that? We developed a very effective method, and we understood early in our work is that everything we do is actually a promotion. So every action that we performed, that we did a lot of street theater, and I'll talk about this a little bit later, but everything that we did was in part about recruiting. So every event that we had our volunteers, people who were there, who were in charge for recruiting. So if somebody would approach one of the activists who were performing a specific action or something and say, okay, I like what you're doing, how can I become a member? They can always direct them and say, oh, look at this, nice young lady there, you can go and speak with her. She will give you more information about how you can help our movement. And then you need to have these people who are there, who can talk to the potential new activists, explain what you are doing, preferably give them a piece of paper where they can read about what you are trying to achieve. And then if these people decide to join, they need to fill an enrollment form where they should list the most important thing, what kind of skills they have. Because you need people with various skills. And this is why when recruiting new members, it is crucial for you to understand what skills these new members bring, because maybe you will have people who are excellent in graphic design, so you would not need to pay someone for creating leaflets every time you decide to do something, but you will have in-house solution, let's call it like that, person in your movement who can do these things. So and this is what we created, and it's good that it is a recycling symbol, but we created this method that we call the Recruit, Train, Act. So what does that mean? First, you recruit people. And the easiest way how to recruit people is by using your phone, and start looking at the friends who might be interested in doing what you are trying to do. And when you recruit new people, you need to train them. When I say train them, I don't mean do some kind of week-long training, but at least do an introductory session where you would talk to these people about what your movement stands for, what you are trying to do, how do you plan to do this, and then they will feel, welcomed by that. And this is what they need. They need someone to welcome them into organization, explain how things work. And then these people, after this training, they can perform a specific action. This is what we were doing all the time. When we would train new people, after the training, we were thinking, what is something that we can do? And then we would perform this action, which would lead, as I say, in recruiting new members, because every action we performed, there were at least several people there whose only job was to recruit new members, to speak with them, to give them information, the enrollment forms that they can sign. But this is crucial. And then when you recruit new people, then you train those people, then those people will act, and then they will bring more members. And following this method, we managed to grow our organization in 2 years from 11 people who started the movement to 70,000 active members. I'm not saying like 70,000 people or, like members in some form. No, 70,000 active people. In every municipality in Serbia, we had a branch of our activists who were willing to act, and also important, they were not waiting for the head office to tell them what to do. They knew the framework because they had been trained. They knew what the organization is doing, how they're doing, and they were led to do these local actions all by themselves because they know best what works on their local level. And this is very important for you also to understand that when you go to a specific environment, you are not there to tell them what their problems are. You are actually there to listen what their problems are. And this is what majority of the movements are doing as a mistake, is going and telling people what their problems are, instead of listening to what the problems are, and then see how this relates to your vision of tomorrow and what you're trying to do, and how can this help them. So, yeah, as I said, I will talk about this. The third principle of a successful nonviolent struggle after unity planning is nonviolent discipline. Nonviolent discipline is crucial because you may build your movement for years, building the credibility, doing the good things, and then you have one violent incident. This one violent incident is going to be what now marks you and your organization. You don't need that. For us, the most crucial thing was actually training our people to be nonviolent. You know, when Otpor was founded, Serbia came out of 4 different wars that were happening in the region. So people were very not nonviolent, to say like that. They were, you know, fed up with the regime, but we understood in order to win, we need to be nonviolent. Why? Because then we are going to take from our opponent their main weapons, and this is violence. And every time they decide to use violence against us, the price of that is skyrocketing because we are nonviolent. And then you have someone using violence against you. It's a boomerang effect. It hits the opponent. It hits the guy who is using the violence in their head. So this is why it is crucial for every movement to maintain nonviolent discipline. We all saw the protest in Hong Kong, as you can see here. You know, the thing is, when these protests have several very effective nonviolent things, they were not so much, how can I say, broadcasted around the world, but every time a violent act happened, and in most cases, these violent acts were perpetrated by guys who infiltrated these movements in order to create villains out of them. And this is what regimes usually do. If they don't like what you're doing, they will try to discredit you in any possible way. And this is what happened here. This movement was, I would say, infiltrated by people who were very aggressive, or they were trying to portray that there is a group in society that is willing to do whatever it takes, including violent methods. Step 7, and this is, I don't know, for all of these things, I say this is the most important one, but without branding, I'm not sure that we would ever be able to succeed. In our case, our logo was, you see here on the screen, this fist, you know, clenched fist. And I don't want to bother you. I can talk about this for, you know, few hours, especially why we choose fist and how it relates to our national identity and the way of thinking. So for you need to understand is that your logo is actually the most, how do you say, effective spokesperson you can find. Why? Because logo you can put everywhere. And this was our main thing. When Otpor started, first thing we did, we used stencils and spray paint to put Otpor logo all around city of Belgrade, the capital of Serbia first, and then the rest of the country, including Montenegro at that time, a separate country, but at that time they were actually the same country, but different voting system. But a lot of people from Serbia were visiting there, especially during summer. So we sent our activists even there to spray paint Otpor fists everywhere. Why? To create this image of an enormous organization. Why? Because people like winners. People like those who achieve things. And if they recognize in you, if they see a strength in you, if they see that you are a person or an organization that gets things done, that's how you get your support. And it is very important also for building an identity. For us, doing this, you know, just raising your hand in the street was a way of, protesting against our regime. And it also became a very identifiable thing, because you would be walking in the street and you would just raise your hand and you would see other people who would be raising hands and you would know you're not alone. So it is crucial for you to work on branding even more. You need to create a brand name out of your brand. And this is crucial. This is what makes people want to join your movement. In our case, we managed to create this fame around our movement. And at one point, people wanted to join our movement because it was an in thing to do. Like, you're not a member of Otpor? Wow. I mean, like, don't come to my party, or things like that. So we created this hype that all the cool kids are actually part of Otpor because they want to be free and they are doing something about it. So we managed to create this identity and branding, and this was very crucial for us, because then just you would see. And what is strange now, and this was happening between 1998 and 2000, there are still few places in the city of Belgrade where I can see the fist spray painted from back then, and it. Even now, when I see that, I have this kind of, strange feeling in me, making me want to do something. Yeah. So branding is very important thing when we are talking about movements. Then also crucial one is creativity, because creativity is something that will distinguish you from all the others. Here we see the examples of how different people in different countries, actually different continents, were handling issues of potholes in the roads. So on the left side, we see examples from Russia, where they put, I think this is the face of a governor or someone, who said, like, here we see, like, we are starting to fix this road and it will be finished until April 2012. So they created him, and this is the hole actually. So it looks like his mouth. Then another very good example of creativity, it comes from Panama in 2015, where activists were actually putting these small devices in the potholes. And every time a car would cross over this device would send a tweet. And, like, I feel horrible. I just caused a tire damage to an old lady's car. And then it calls the company that is in charge for fixing roads in Panama City. And they say, like, see what you made me do. I damaged this old lady's car. And every time actually a car would come over this device, it would send a tweet, different kind, but very similar tweet. But if you don't have this technology, if you don't have these possibilities, we see also here an example from Zimbabwe, where activists were actually planting different flowers or different things inside the potholes to point out, especially also to the drivers, like, guys, there is a huge hole here. Don't destroy your car by hitting it. So what I'm trying to say is that you need to use your creativity. Otpor, our movement, actually created its name by being creative, by doing these funny things, crazy different things every different day, pointing out specific issues. And why is this not moving? Yeah. And the humor is the best weapon you can have. In our case, the humor was very good in fighting fear, but the humor is very good also in fighting apathy, which is what you will be facing today. Your activists will not be that much afraid of your opponents, but actually they will be apathetic. They will not care about things. So this is why humor is a very good thing to wake people out of the apathy. And here we have example on the left-hand side. It's an example from Serbia. What we did, actually our activists were taking these barrels, empty oil barrels, and leaving them in parks or pedestrian areas. And you would see on this barrel, it's a target sign, and in the middle is actually the photo of our former president. And there was an inscription on this barrel and says, put 1 dinar, it's a coin, Serbian coin, put 1 dinar inside and hit him with a bat. But if you don't have a dinar, hit him twice because that's because of him. And this is a very low risk action because our activists would go, place this barrel, hit it a few times, and then you would actually have people lining up and waiting for their turn to come to this barrel and to hit it. And you know, every time you hit the barrel, it creates this huge noise and it attracts people. And for our activists, it was very safe because they could leave this barrel and then just disappear. And then, of course, what is happening? In our case, the police came and they were like, okay, what are we going to do? There is a barrel with the picture of the president and people are hitting it. And they say, are these people activists? They say, no, they're just shoppers. Can we arrest them? Say, no, don't arrest them because they're not Otpor activists, but arrest the barrel. So then you would have policemen who were going around the city and collecting these barrels instead of doing their job, which was important for us to use this and to show to our opponent. But also it was funny to do this. Another example on the right-hand side, we see from Siberia. It is when government in city of Barnaul, the government banned protests. They said people cannot protest against anything. And the activists actually created this toy protest. So they put all these different kind of toys, like Lego toys or whatever, Kinder toys. They put them and they all had this kind of small banners with messages, political messages, but they were also very humorous ones. And what do you think happened in city of Barnaul? Well, the mayor of city of Barnaul, he banned this protest because he said, and there is actually a document where he says that these toys are banned from protest because they are not citizens of Russia. Yeah, so this is actually how your humor can actually make your opponent do or say some ridiculous things. Or actually like banning toys from protest. I mean, it creates this impression in society, and it should create this impression with your activists, is that actually these guys, they don't know what they're doing. And this is what motivates people to take more active role and try to do something about it. And then the most important thing that you need to do when you start something, and that is finish it, you know. And here we have this example of Arab Spring. In 2011, when Arab Spring was happening, everybody was saying, okay, there is this, you know, like seed of freedom that is starting in Egypt and it will be, you know, very important. But the problem is that this other side was very, very influential, and they were very strong. They managed to completely destroy the idea of the Arab Spring. And I don't know how many of you are aware of it, but actually when the revolution was happening in Egypt, people just wanted to have free and fair elections where they can choose their president and not, you know, have a pharaoh who is there forever and then his son will how do you say, inherit the position when his father is gone, and then it will remain a family dynasty forever. This is not what people wanted. They wanted free and fair elections. And another thing is that, and you can see this number here, that 58% of the movements, they make it to the winning point. They actually manage to do something, but then they fail. If we look at the case of Arab Spring, the guys there, they managed to mobilize the people. They managed to, you know, to create this climate in the environment, in the country where the time for democracy has came. But then the problem was that after the change happened, after Mubarak left, the Muslim Brotherhood, they managed to take over, but that was only temporary because they were the only ones who had any form of organization before the Mubarak was overthrown. So it was easy for them to convert to political party and then take the majority of the elections. But then you have to understand that Arab Spring in 2001 actually showed people of Egypt how can they make a change in their society. So if you look at the results for Morsi, I think 13 million people voted for him. But then like a year and a half later, you had around 20 million people on the streets against him, asking him to step down so they will have a free and fair elections, because the things that he was doing were not related to the Arab Spring and the ideals that actually made people go to the streets and overthrow Mubarak. And they were failing them. The problem was that at that point, the military stepped in, and the current president of Egypt decided that this was the chance for him to take over by saying, I'm doing this for the people because they don't like this guy. But the people did not call for another dictator to come to power. They just wanted free and fair elections. And unfortunately, that did not happen. And the first thing Sisi did when he came to power is to arrest all the people who were actually mobilizing and working actively in overthrowing Mubarak. So all these people were arrested instantly, and some of them, unfortunately, are still in prison. So it is important for you to understand that when you start something, you need to make sure that you follow it through all the way to the end. Because as you see here, 58% of the movements almost make it to the end, but then they fail. So I don't know what is my time now, but I think am I good? Should we have some questions now, maybe, Helena? Or
yeah, so I think if you just want to wrap up, you could have like 5 more minutes, and then we could go on to questions, unless you're, I don't know if you're done already, but
no, I mean, it's okay. I can just go through this again. What we were talking about is, you have to understand, when you're creating social movement, you need to understand, first of all, what you're trying to achieve. And this is your vision of tomorrow. What are you trying to achieve? Then how do you plan to achieve this is a crucial part. This is your strategy. This is how do you plan to do this. And as I say, it is important for every single step is for you to step back and look at it from a different angle, because this is why it is important to have the more and more people in your movement constantly, because they will bring new ideas, they will bring fresh new skills, they will help your movement become more diverse, and by becoming more diverse, it will be more effective. And we know, I mean, in our case, it was crucial to have people from not just people who are Serbian nationality, because in Serbia we have a lot of minorities from different ethnical groups, and for us it was crucial to include these people in our vision of tomorrow, because they are all the citizens of Serbia. And this is what you all must think. You must also think about your opponents. And very important thing for you to understand is, if you decide to do this, you need to step out of your comfort zone. You need to get out of your comfort zone, and you need to speak to your opponents, and speak in a concise and non-confrontational way, but you need to speak to them. The most important reason why is you need to understand how they are thinking. And you need to know that if you want to mute them, to mute your opponents, if you want to mobilize your people, you need to know what your opponents are saying. And by listening closely to them, you will know what are the things they are trying to emphasize, what are the things they are trying to hide. So it is important, to step out of your comfort zone. As I say, there is an excellent example, and maybe you should look it up. I forgot the name of the initiative or the movement. It's in the US. It arose after one of the latest school shootings that happened in Florida, I think.
I think you mean March for Our Lives, right?
Sorry?
March for Our Lives?
Yeah, exactly. So you know about them. And this is what I encourage people to look, how they actually managed to achieve a very big victory. Maybe not so much, how can I say, maybe it is still not so much visible, but what they managed to do is they managed to deal a significant blow to NRA. And NRA is National Rifleman Association, or the most influential organization in the US that is pro-arms. And they are the ones who are organizing strong lobbies, giving money to the politicians, because they have a lot of influence. And this group of young people, actually high school students, they managed to organize such a strong campaigns, but they were not targeting NRA, they were targeting their sources of financing. So they were targeting, they knew that they could not do a lot of things, but they knew we can at least make Walmart and Amazon, we can make them stop selling guns. You know, stop selling automatic guns. And I mean, for the people who are not aware of this, in the US, actually, you can go to the Walmart, buy an automatic gun, buy bullets, and also in the next aisle, you can buy alcohol in the same place. So this is unfortunately the US. So they managed to target Walmart and Amazon and persuade them to stop selling automatic weapons because they were threatening to boycott their businesses. And Walmart and Amazon, they do a lot of business. They need their shops to bring profit. The other thing is that this group of people, they were targeting every other major donor of NRA. Like, for instance, airline companies in the US. Because if you were the member of NRA, you would have an NRA card and you would have, I think, 10% discount on all Delta flights. So they managed to put the pressure on these companies to stop providing these benefits to the members of NRA. And by doing this, they managed to lower the percentage of NRA donations, because if we look election after election in the US, usually there is around 20% increase in donations every new election cycle. But the NRA actually had a 40% drop in their donations, where everybody else were giving more money, they had to give way less money because they have been affected by this campaign very, very strongly. And why? Because these guys, they use their mind by thinking, okay, how can we target them? We cannot target them directly, but let's go after their sources of financing or something else. So this is what I'm saying. Pick your targets carefully and, you know, make them count. Okay, so I mean, now we can go to the questions.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. So we have a few questions from the YouTube chat asking, wait, let me find it. Here we go. How do we create this emotional connection with fellow activists, and if that is not very intense? And then they asked the second question, how can you be accessible emotionally yet protect your own well-being as a leader or as like a person who's leading a movement?
So let me answer first the second one. This is what I'm saying. This is why we always propose to the organizations and movements, especially the ones who are starting to organize, is, you know, opt in for this, how we say, loose leadership, where you don't have a single person, but you have a leadership, you have a group of people who is actually doing all the major decisions. And then if you have this group of people, it is very hard to put pressure on all of them. You know, if you have a single person, depending on the country where you are, and, you know, I'm sure that, I'm sorry, what's the name, Mitzi? I think that Mitzi can talk about how hard it is, for instance, to be an activist in Philippines, you know, and what can government do to a leader of the opposition movement or a nonviolent movement? There are many bad things that can happen to them. And there are many countries around the world that, you know, bring the same level of risks for risk for activists. So the best way how to tackle this is to have this loose leadership where there will be not a single person that can be pressured or coerced or killed or whatever they can do to that person. And we've seen all of these examples happening. What was the first question? I'm sorry. It's about.
Sorry, I'll say it again.
Something
Also,
about,
how can we create this emotional connection with fellow activists? And if they asked if that's not very intense.
no, yeah, I understand, because I mean, emotions are very hard. You don't want to use too much emotions in your work. First of all, why? Because if you steer emotions into people, it's very hard to, you know, I would say, to dial it back. This is very hard. So it is important to you know, to be careful about this. And how do you create this? In our case, it was crucial for activists to know that we are always there for them. So in our case, if some of our activists would get arrested, we had the plan in place. So for instance, someone is arrested, we have the entire plan in place. We just start doing it. So the plan was call the media, call international organizations, inform them that our activists have been arrested, organize a group of people that will go in front of the jail to protest until they are released. My favorite was we had a group of older people, usually grandmas, and we would give them the number of police station and ask them to call the police station and ask about our activists. So then you would have, like, I don't know, 15, 20 grandmas who would be calling the police station asking, why have you arrested my neighbor? He's such a nice kid. He helps me with my chores. And you know, we were trying to put all kinds of pressures. We had lawyers who were ready to do pro bono service to our activists, who were already had their power of attorney signed. So they would just appear and you would have like 5 most prominent lawyers appearing and say, this is my client. Who, this kid that we picked up for wearing a t-shirt? Yeah, he is my client. Why are you keeping him here? And we would try to build this pressure. And then this is how you create this emotional bond with your fellow activists. This is different than how do you create an emotional bond with the you know, general population or with people in your society. But with activists, you make them understand that you are there for them, that you have a plan for whatever happens. And for us, when we were doing these kind of actions where people could get arrested, it was important to for them to volunteer for that. We would never say, like, you know, you will go there. No, we would explain to the people there is a high level that someone will get arrested. Are you sure you want to participate? And at one point, there was this badge, Otpor badge, that was red color. And the only people who could get the red color badge were the ones who were arrested 5 times or more. So it was like a matter of prestige. You know, like, oh, he has a red one? Oh, he's like, you know, he's the man. Yeah, so he was arrested more than 5 times. So we created this as not something to be embarrassed of, but to be proud of, because you have been arrested for something that you believe in. And this is not like you stole something. No, you were arrested. And most of Otpor activists in Serbia were arrested for some ridiculous things, like wearing an Otpor t-shirt. This could get you arrested. Just by wearing the t-shirt, you could end up in jail. But yeah, it's another story, a longer story. So yeah, let's move to the next question, maybe.
We had a question about training. I'm looking for the question. What are good ways to train new recruits, and how do you make sure that they are not following their own agenda?
Well, I mean, you need to understand that. I mean, I cannot tell you what's the best way that, you know, you make sure that no one follows an agenda. Is make them understand that your agenda is the most important one. I mean, then they will stop thinking about their agendas. For instance, Otpor was a movement that was created out of people from various backgrounds. Whether there are different political parties, different you know, universities, different interests. So it was really diverse group. And it was important to be a diverse group in order to be very effective. You're muted, sorry. I think, yes.
Thanks. I think that's all the questions we have going to you right now. Mitzi sadly had to leave. She had to commute home, so we can't ask her questions anymore.
Yeah, especially because this time she's in Philippines.
Yeah, exactly. It's quite late for her. Yeah. So I think that's all the questions I see right now. I think, are there more? Okay, no, one second. I'm looking for them.
Maybe Q&A, no open questions. Okay.
Oh, I see questions here right now. Sorry, they were sent to me in a different place. What would you suggest being the best way to raise funding to run the movement? And what is your opinion on paying a core operational team so that we can afford the time it takes instead of volunteering?
Well, what to say? So, when we are talking about non-violent movements, especially in autocratic regimes, then my answer would be no, you should never get paid. And this is why, because in Otpor, there was not, I think only one person was paid, received a salary, and that was the person who was in charge for financial things. So we needed the person, who is there for their skills, so we had to pay for that position. But none of the other activists were ever paid. And this was very important. But now we are talking about something different. We are talking about the movement, environmental movement, and it is a little bit different. But I think that I understand the question, because if you want to devote yourself 100%, you also need to eat. I mean, you need to bring some kind of income. So it makes sense for you to be to have some sort of salary or something. I don't know how to call this, reimbursement for your work. But that's not crucial. I mean, the most important is how much are you willing to sacrifice for this, because it is not just money, but it's also time. And if you're talking how best to fundraise, there are many different things. But first of all, you need to understand, why do you need money for? Because it is different if you need money for salaries for your people, or it is different if you need money for the materials to perform specific action. What we tried in most cases, we were never asking for money, but we were asking for people, you want to support us? And somebody would come and say, like, guys, I like what you're doing, I want to help you. So, I want to give you some money. And we say, no, don't give us money, but we will contact you when we need something. So for instance, we were doing something and we need 100 t-shirts. And then we would call this person and say, can you print 1,000 t-shirts for us, or 100 t-shirts for us? Or can you pay a bus from point A to point B that would need to take our activists there? Or can you pay a gasoline? So we were trying not to ask people for money, but actually for in-kind donations, where they would provide something to us. And this is first the most important, because then you, how can I say, you don't have this relation, like somebody gave you money and then, they expect to see what that money actually did or whatever. This way, they actually gave you 100 t-shirts, or they paid the bus for you and your activists to do something. So when you are looking for donations, first of all, look at, friends or family, those who have like successful businesses or companies, and then maybe ask them to connect you to their friends. But this is how you start. I mean, you start always, how you start by your own phone book. You start by looking at your phone book, see there are people there who can help. And the moment you start creating the name for yourself, the people will come to you also and say, like, I want to help you, I want to support you. And you have to think about, how are you going to structure? Are there going to be people who will be in charge for fundraising, or then it's up to you again. Yeah.
Thank you. I actually have one more question from me, and I feel like a lot of the time people are scared to start a movement or join a movement because they think they need to have some special training, or they need to, know something. I don't know what they need to know, that they need to be in some kind of special position or to change something. And I was hoping that you could maybe say something about that.
Well, I can start with 3 words: that is wrong. I mean, of course, it is, how can I say, good if you have a special skill. But just by caring about specific issue makes you skillful enough to take part in any nonviolent movement, if you really care about this issue. I mean, what qualifications you need to, I don't know, to wave a flag, or to go and distribute leaflets to the people. All you need is a small training. How do you approach people? And this is something that can be done in half an hour with this person, because it's not just go to someone in the street and give him the leaflet without saying anything. You know, there are ways. How do you approach the people? You stand in front of them, you smile, you offer this, you say, please take, you know, I mean, there are ways how you do this. And this is something that can be taught. And as I say, you know, I said at one point, what we are talking about here, it's a process. It's actually a skill that you can learn. It's not something that people get born with. I mean, I was not born an activist. You know, living in Serbia at that time, I did not have much choice, but actually I decided to do something about it. How can you do something about it? Become active and do something about it. So the most important thing there is, do these people really want to do something? If they won't, it doesn't matter what kind of skills they have, the movement will give them enough skills and trainings for the things that they need. And as I'm saying you, this is not like they need a qualified training, you know, like, no, it's like to give leaflets on the street, it's half an hour talk, you know, so.
Yeah, thank you so much. I think that's a great way to come to an end. I don't see any questions anymore. Thank you so much, everybody, for listening. For everyone who maybe just came at the end or something, the whole thing will be uploaded on YouTube under the same link. So if you want to watch it later, then you can just do that. You can, you know, see it later, or and if you have any more questions at a further point in time, feel free to ask us those, you know, over Instagram or in YouTube, and we'll try and get the answers to those. And yeah, thank you so much for the input. I'll tell Mitzi as well. I personally enjoyed it very, very much. I think it was a really great way to think about how we can create change right now, and even, you know, in the situation where we desperately need it. I think if nobody else has any points, then I think we can stop streaming. Thank you everyone so much for coming. Thank you so much to all the translators for doing the translating. Yeah, I think that's all from me. I wish everyone a great rest of the day or start of the day, wherever you are in the world. And, you know, happy holidays and happy winter and all that stuff.
Okay, guys. Thank you once again, and keep fighting the good fight.
Oh, he's still streaming?
Yeah.
Oh, wait a second.